Is LSU finally ready to get back to playing elite defense? Let's talk about it. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below, so thank you sincerely for that. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. LSU practiced on Monday out at LSU, after which it was the 10th practice of fall camp, after which Blake Baker met with reporters. Now, this is likely going to be the only time we get to talk to Blake Baker until the spring. So we had to make the most of it. And we covered a lot of ground with Blake Baker. So I'm going to dedicate this episode to our conversation with Blake Baker, just like I dedicated Monday's episode this week before the practice report to our conversation with Joe Sloan. And one of the things Blake Baker said that I think is a great jumping off point for this conversation is him talking about this defense, coaching this defense as a whole. It's not a long soundbite, but I want you to hear it because this is a great cultural, contextual 30 seconds that'll let us really be the genesis for the rest of our conversation today. I think you're going to enjoy this. Give a listen.
We haven't lost a game yet, but this is one of the most fun defenses I've ever coached. It is a group of guys that are all pulling the rope in the same direction. And again, that came through the evaluation process, whether it be freshmen or portal guys. I think Coach Kelly has built a tremendous culture here, and those guys became one of us. You know, it wasn't a mercenary here and a mercenary there. They all came together very, very quickly.
I love that soundbite. Haven't lost a game, but it's the most fun defense he's ever coached. And I think there's a reason for that. This is just my opinion, and we're gonna delve into a lot more nuance here. But one of the things that Brian Kelly said at SEC Media Days, I remember I had this conversation with him in my one-on-one. And when he came here, he talked about recruiting through the high school ranks, supplementing through the portal. He really wanted to develop. And he lived that his first 3 years where the portal numbers kept decreasing. And this year, you saw a gigantic shift the other way where they added 19 players via the transfer portal. Okay. After they had gone from, nearly 20 to 15 to 9 and back up, shot back up this year, right? And my opinion as to why is because he realized to win a championship, he's going to need more veteran players. Now, Brian Kelly said in the one-on-one I had with him that they were only able to do that this year because they built the culture to be able to do it. Now, I think part of it could be what Blake Baker just said there. It's the evaluation of not only the player, but the person that you've brought in. And I believe there is a commonality with all of the transfers that LSU brought in this year. And there's two things. Because remember, LSU didn't bring in young players via the portal this year. Jack Pyburn's a 3-year player at Florida, is going into his 4th year. Patrick Payton's going into his 5th year of college. Jamari Butler's going to his 6th year of college. A guy like Braylon Moore is going into his 4th year. He started 24 games at Virginia Tech. You see my point? Like AJ Haulcy is going into his 4th year. He's played in 36 games with 33 starts. They didn't bring in young players. Barian Brown's a 3-year starter at Kentucky going into his 4th year. They didn't bring in young players. They brought in old players, veteran players who played a ton of football. And my opinion is these guys have two things in common. Number one, and not necessarily in this order, but they want to get paid, and all of them did by coming to LSU because LSU was very liquid. They had money to spend. wanted to get paid, and they wanted to win. Because to be very clear, all of these guys could have just gone to the highest bidder. And in many cases, that might have been LSU, but not in all the cases. They wanted to go to a place where they were going to get paid, get developed for the next level, all that stuff, but win. And when you want to go somewhere where you're going to win, you're more bought in culturally to all the things that are going on, which is why a guy like Bauer Sharp, Jack Pyburn, these guys are vocal leaders, even though they haven't taken a snap as an LSU Tiger yet. That's a common thread within all of the guys that LSU's brought in via the portal, but a lot of them on defense. And the reason, naturally, they had to go heavy on defense is because LSU's been bad on defense. They needed to improve at every level of their defense. And they did with a lot of guys who, as Blake Baker said, are bought in. I want to provide some context, and this might blow your mind. I'm going to run what I'm about to tell you are a lot of numbers, but just trust me when I tell you, you don't have to memorize any of this. It's just like you're going to understand when I rattle this off. It's going to be jarring to you because I went and did this exercise. We have become in the last half decade, starting in the COVID year in 2020, we have become conditioned to expect LSU's defense to be average to bad. I think that's fair. And it's almost that we've forgotten what it was like for LSU to be great defensively. Let me give you some context, okay? We know that in 2023, worst defense ever at LSU, they finished 82nd in total defense. Now, there was a year in COVID year, they finished 99th in total defense, which was worse, but they allowed more yards as the games evolved and all that sort of stuff. But in 2023, they were so bad. We all remember that defense. They finished 82nd. Last year, in 2024, was a dramatic improvement. They finished 59th. Dramatic improvement, but still 59th. Do you remember the Bradley Dale Pivot, the Malvito, Doug Mallory, Bradley Dale Pivito defense in 2008, the co-defensive coordinator disaster, abject, massive disaster, lasted 1 year. Les Miles blew those guys out, brought in John Chavis. Remember I told you last year LSU finished 59th. That year, they were 56th. That horrendous, awful, cataclysmic season of a defense that caused those defensive coordinators to get blown out after one season and hiring John Chavis, they were 56th. You remember 2013? Mettenberger, 3,000-yard passer. Jarvis and Odell, both 1,000-yard receivers. Jeremy Hill, 1,000-yard rusher. First time that had ever happened in the history of the SEC. 3,000-yard passer, 2,000-yard receivers, and a 1,000-yard rusher. But that 2013 team, God, remember that game at Georgia? Couldn't get stops. Bad defensive year in 2013. God, it was really tough. In 2013, LSU finished 21st nationally in total defense. Do you want to know what the standard was at LSU to what it is? That's a great illustration. Go back to Nick Saban's first season in 2000. I looked this up. 25 years of defense. Again, this is where I'm going to rattle numbers. You don't have to memorize them. I'm just going to illustrate. Nick Saban's first year, LSU was 33rd in the country in total defense. 2001, they won the SEC. They were 38th. Then 15th, then 1st. They led the country in total defense when they won the national championship in 2003. 14th, 3rd. Les Miles' first year, 2005, they were 3rd in the country in total defense. In 2006, they were 4th. 17, they win the 07, they win the national championship. They were 17th in total defense. Then came Malvito, awful year, 56th. What did they do? They bring in John Chavis, 11th, 2nd in total defense in 2011, 12th, that awful year in 2013, right? Awful year, 21st. 2014, remember that 2014 LSU team? Got blown out on the road at Auburn, got blown out at home by Mississippi State. That 2014 LSU defense finished 4th in the country. 2015, they were 41st, 5th, 14th, 26th in 2018, 33rd in 2019, and then the last 5 years have come. 99th, 70th, 34th in Brian Kelly's first year with Matt House, than 82nd and 59th. We have forgotten what it was like to see LSU play truly elite defense, to the point where in 2013, when LSU finished 21st, that was an abject failure. In 2008, when LSU was 56, it was so horrendous and unacceptable that those guys got fired after one season. LSU was 59th in the country last year, and it was such a dramatic improvement from the year before. We're lauding Blake Baker. And we should, by the way. It was a dramatic improvement without a very talented roster. But now, Blake Baker, who is a great defensive coach and now has a talented roster with guys who are veteran and bought in, how good can they be? That, I think, is going to be the fascinating question about this defense. We might start to get some answers that I want to delve into when we come back. Locked on LSU, your team every day. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. And you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. If you're tired of endless scrolling to find the best deals, Gametime's Zone Deals pick has the best seats in your section for you. And if you ever wonder what your view would actually look like before you buy your tickets, the Gametime app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, so we've established a baseline for what LSU defense was, what they are. Now let's talk about what they can be. I asked Blake Baker in this press conference about the massive amount of rotation we've seen. And I will be candid with you. I go to all these practices and I have my notebook and my pen, and I do my very best to chart as much as I can. I have given up trying to chart all of the defensive replacements, because there are, in a matter of a couple of plays, when they go 11 on 11, wholesale changes. For example, we saw a sequence on Monday where Devon Keys and Tylen Singleton were the first-team linebackers. Now, I don't think those guys are going to take the first defensive snap against Clemson, but it's just an illustration. We saw a sequence where AJ Haulcy and Javon Toviano were the starting safeties in one team period. Another team period, it was Haulcy and Cooley. We're just seeing so much rotation, it's impossible to keep up with. So I asked Blake Baker, hey man, are y'all rotating so much because you still know who's going to start, or you just need to get all of these guys experience?
That's a really good question. Like right now, how many times do we have the same 11 guys on the field throughout a practice? It's probably pretty rare if you were to sit there and chart it. Again, part of it is to evaluate him as a starter. Part of him to evaluate is to see, okay, when this guy gets thrown in with the other, quote unquote ones, how does he respond? Some guys elevate their game, some guys don't. And then again, there is a lot of positions that are genuine, and this is not coach speak, that are genuinely up in the air right now. And that's a positive. It just speaks to the quality of depth that we have. But across the board, I mean, to sit here and say, I would say there's very few bona fide starters that I'm going to say, okay, this guy on the 30th is going to be the first one out there. And that's a good problem to have. It's competitive depth. I've been so impressed with how all these guys are working together too. They are striving together to become the best defense they can be. There's no pettiness. There's no, I'm not going to tell you to check because I want your job. You know what I mean? So it's been encouraging.
I believe him when he talks about the quality depth, because there are two ways to look at it. You could say, well, the fact that they haven't identified their best 11 is a problem. I think the flip side is they haven't identified their first 11, because it could go a lot of ways. For example, I don't know if Gabe Relaford and Jack Pyburn are going to start at end, because why wouldn't Patrick Payton be a starter at defensive end? or Jamari Butler, who's a 6-year player coming in from Nebraska. We've raved this camp about Bernard Gooden at tackle. There's times he's running with the twos because Dom McKinley and Ahmad Bro are your ones, or a 6th-year tackle like Jacobian Guillory coming back. What if it's Guillory and McKinley? That means Bro and Gooden are running with the twos. Okay, well, what if Gooden runs with the ones? Is Dom McKinley a two? I don't think you see it that way. I think you have to look at it in terms of they're all going to play regardless of who takes the first snap, and it is great quality depth, which you didn't have a year ago. Think about what you were rolling out there at defensive tackle a year ago. With all due respect, I think guys like Gio Paez and Paris Shan did yeoman's work. Ahmad Bro, as a freshman, came in as a defensive end, put on a bunch of weight, and kicked inside to play tackle as a true freshman in the SEC. That's incredible. That's only 3 guys you were rotating until Dom McKinley came back midway through the season with injury. It's a dramatically different reality this year as opposed to a year ago. And as far as the not knowing who the starters are going to be, I would say this. Harold Perkins, like snap one against Clemson. Harold Perkins is going to be your star, and Whit Weeks is going to be one of your linebackers. That's a given. And I believe AJ Haulcy, who's your best safety, is going to be one of the starters on the first snap against Clemson. But then again, it could be Tamarcus Cooley and Jordan Gilbert, who both played a ton of football as well. Anyway, but I think those 3 guys are a given. I could believe anything else. Like if you told me Mansour Delane and Ashton Stamps were the first team corners snap one, I'd probably buy that. But if you tell me DJ Pickett over the next 2 weeks steals one of their jobs, I could certainly see that as well. If you tell me that Pyburn and Peyton are starting at end, okay. But if you tell me it's Relaford and Peyton, I could believe that too. The point is, they do have so much quality depth, and I don't think they've established who the starters are going to be, and I don't think it matters because you are going to see wholesale changes because there's so little drop-off. You're going to be able to keep fresh bodies in there throughout the entirety of any game. Now, the other question that I asked Blake Baker, in addition to all the rotation there, was specifically about the safety position. And I asked him about safety because we've all talked about it. Last year, it was the worst position on the field. That's not even debatable. Go to Pro Football Focus or just use your eyes. They were awful at safety. It was the weakest part of the defense, which is astonishing considering this is a program that's produced LaRon Landry and Jamal Adams and Grant Delpit and Eric Reed. And my goodness, go through the list of the amazing safeties that have rolled through this program. And last year was awful. And so they went and got AJ Haulcy out of the transfer portal. They added Tamarcus Cooley as well. But I asked Blake Baker intentionally an open-ended question. There's many different ways to ask a question. You can ask a very direct question. So as to say, for example, last week when Nussmeier had the injury thing, when we got a chance to talk to Brian Kelly, you could ask a very direct question, say, Brian, was Garrett Nussmeier a full participant in practice today? There was no wiggle room out of that question. There was no ambiguity. But then there's also leading questions where you might say, Coach, how important has AJ Haulcy been in your defense because of his experience and his leadership? Well, you just gave him the answer. When you ask an open-ended question, you allow them to take it where they want. And I specifically did not mention a player by name to see, because if they do mention a player, that tells you who's at the top of their mind. So I asked Blake Baker, the way I phrased the question was, how would you assess your safety position so far through fall camp? That was my question. How would you assess your safeties so far through fall camp? Give a listen.
It's usually the burning question, and rightfully so. I've been really, really pleased with those guys. I think Coach Olson and Coach Joseph, one, it helps being in year 2. And then 2, I think with the additions of Tamarcus Cooley and AJ Haulcy, it's been really, really good, especially with AJ. He's played a lot of football. He's extremely instinctual, one of the most instinctual players I've been around. So him just having that awareness and the communication. But when you look at the depth in that room, again, we talk about Deshaun Spears, Toviano, Jordan Gilbert. It's a good problem to have. It's a good luxury to have, and that's kind of going to be the recurring theme as we move on. When I really feel good about our depth across the board, but especially at that position, I think they're coming along very, very well.
the burning question, and rightfully so. He confirmed. We saw what you saw. Not good at safety last year. And obviously actions speak louder than words. They went and signed to him in the portal. And then he brought up Haulcy. I didn't mention AJ Haulcy. He mentioned AJ Haulcy. He's played a lot of football. He said he's one of the most instinctual players I've been around. That's confirmation of everything we've talked about with AJ Haulcy to this point. The national pundits may not know AJ Haulcy. If you got two eyes and you watch LSU play and you see 13 in purple, you're going, that's him. And he's going to be a really good player, and why I think he will be one of the starters when they take on Clemson. There's two more players. Blake Baker highlighted that. I talked about that. I want to highlight. We'll do it next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. If we talk about AJ Haulcy as one of the most impactful transfers so far, we can't get too far down the line without also mentioning Bernard Gooden, the transfer from South Florida. And one of the big questions about Gooden is, can a guy that's 6'1", 268 pounds play defensive tackle in the SEC? And Blake Baker acknowledged that that's one of the things that they had to question when they were looking at Bernard Gooden in the transfer portal. But remember, I also told you from a couple of practices ago, and I told you, mark the tape. If you're an everydayer, you heard me say it. But I talked about Bernard Gooden, and I told you how when they were doing one-on-one pass rush drills, how he never shuts up. And how he's going to be a guy that draws penalty flags from opposing defenders because he's going to frustrate him because of how much he talks. At one point in practice, Kyle Williams was like, man, just shut up and play football. Blake Baker was asked about Bernard Gooden. Give a listen.
That was a great pickup. Bernard Gooden has been a joy in every sense of the word to coach. He is high energy. Y'all probably hear him more than anyone on the field. But in today's game, you even look in the NFL, there's not many, a lot of really, really successful defensive tackles are going to be between 280 and 305 pounds. The thing that he does really well, because he is so twitchy and has such good get off, his second foot's in the ground before the offensive lineman. So even though he might be giving up 30 pounds, he's able to get leverage and get power, and the offensive lineman doesn't have his second foot in the ground. So, one of the things that we did through the evaluation process, obviously being an undersized guy, is really evaluate him hard against the run, and we really liked what we saw, and we really, really like what we see up to this point. He's done a great job creating havoc and holding point.
Creating havoc and holding point, by the way, on Monday, the defense created one negative play in all of the team periods. One. It was Bernard Gooden with a TFL on Caleb Jackson for a loss of a yard. He has lived in the offensive backfield this fall camp because exactly what Blake Baker just said. And it's not something that I would know. I don't watch him on film. I just watch him live at practice, and you're all going to get a chance to see him when they play. He wears 88. He's going to be impossible to miss because he's that impactful. But Blake Baker said it. His second foot is in the ground before the offensive lineman has their first foot in the ground, which is why he is able to get so much penetration, and he is exciting to watch. I'm telling you, it's another reason why those two guys, which were spring portal pickups. Remember, you could have gone through that spring portal, not added anybody else. But they added Haulcy and Gooden. And I think those two dudes are going to be massively impactful on this defense. And it's just two veteran players who played a lot of football, who are very good at what they do. And I think are going to be really impactful guys, but also guys that, because they were 3 stars ranked in the thousands coming out of high school, nobody looks at them as impactful pickups because they're not going to help you in the blue chip ratio. But those are dudes who at 18 were dramatically different players than they are now at 21, 22 years old. And what they are now are experienced dudes who are instinctual, as Blake Baker said, twitchy and impactful, creating havoc. I think both those guys are going to have a huge factor, play a huge role in this defense, as will Harold Perkins. And we've talked about Harold plenty over the last 3 years, and you can understand why Blake Baker is excited to have a healthy Harold Perkins in 2025.
I think the most encouraging thing that I've seen is it never looked like he's had knee surgery. He's moving around very, very fluid. we're going to be smart with him according, to his reps and make sure that he's ready to go on the 30th. But he's just so dynamic. I think out there in space, when you see his ability to close, if there's a check down to the flat or obviously coming off the edge or even internally, he just has a sixth gear that not many guys in college football possess. And so to have that luxury, I think he's more comfortable out there. I really do. And I've seen growth from him. He's very coachable, but I'm excited to see what he does this season.
Another thing Blake Baker told us in a different answer about Harold is that after the season, he sat down with Harold and said, Harold, where do you want to play? And Perkins, like a great team guy, said, Coach, I'll play wherever you want me to play. And Blake Baker said, no. I want you to tell me where you want to play. And he said, Coach, I think I'm best at the Star. And a lot of times that's the answer. That's what Blake Baker told us on Monday. Like, the players know themselves best and where they think they would best fit. And Harold Perkins, it might have taken 2 years of discernment of thinking he wanted to be an off-the-ball linebacker for the NFL, but then realizing what he really is to get to this point now. As a senior, that none of us thought he was going to play 4 years of college football. But be it because being out of position, an unfortunate injury a year ago, whatever the case may be, Harold Perkins is healthy and finally in, as I've called it, his natural habitat, and I think poised for a great year. And a reason why LSU, which was 59th in total defense a year ago, is likely going to look much more like the LSU defense we became accustomed to seeing for the better part of 20 years. It's going to be fun to watch it throughout this year, and we'll be following it all the way along right here on Locked On LSU. Hey, thanks so much for making us your first listen. Now for your second listen, check out the portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review if you are on YouTube. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day. It's Locked On LSU, your team every day.